Last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. A Florida CPS agent is charged with soliciting sexual favors from a CPS victim by offering her his urine to help her pass a drug test in exchange for sex. Governor Rick Scott of Florida orders the child protective industry to check on all the disabled kids who are being warehoused in nursing homes. The American Civil Liberties Union is suing over Governor Rick Scott's mandatory drug testing program for welfare recipients. And the Florida Commission on the Status of Women is discussing the problem of girls aging out of foster care onto the streets with no place to go. In New York, the Supreme Court justice refuses to order the state to make retroactive payments to a family and district court judges for going 13 years without a raise. In Nebraska, so-called experts are trying to address the high number of kids unnecessarily removed from their homes. Although even when you get your kids back, it doesn't mean that you will be able to keep them in the state. And Nebraska's child welfare reform efforts over the last few years were a total flop that, as it turns out, could cost the state $3.2 million in federal funding. In Maine, Governor Paul LePage cuts child care subsidies and funding for Head Start programs, meaning that many parents will no longer have these options for their children. Paul LePage also bows down to the complaints of an Indian tribe whose children were formerly targeted by CPS agents by creating a Truth and Reconciliation Commission so such things never happen again, while ignoring the fact that Maine's child protective industry does the same thing to children of every other race. In Arizona, the child protective industry is desperate to hire more CPS agents to deal with their ever-soaring caseloads. And the Arizona child protective industry discovers a glitch in their computer system that they say kept records from parents and lawyers for more than 15 years and could have led to wrongful removals of kids and prevented caregivers from supporting civil claims against the state. California, the Sacramento County child protective industry is being accused of fostering a culture of absenteeism, as only 55% of CPS agents in the county show up for work on any given day. In Kentucky, a website is created where you can rat out your friends and neighbors for practically anything that is not an emergency abuse situation. In Indiana, the push is on for a ban on the use of dangerous physical restraints on special needs kids. And in Massachusetts, the school superintendent is asking the state to look into allegations of mistreatment of special needs kids in a Lexington school seclusion room. In Connecticut this week, the state is being paid to help the families and return the stolen kids to their homeless parents. This due to a new federal program that is providing funding to help homeless with housing so they can get their kids back from CPS agents. A new study finds that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered foster kids are subjected to verbal harassment and physical and sexual abuse because they are considered easy targets while in the foster care system. In Texas, a federal judge rules that the child protective industry is not immune from withholding $1 million in overtime for CPS agents. In Illinois, cops and child advocates are warning that there will be more abuse and neglect of children thanks to Governor Pat Quinn's budget cuts. And in Washington, D.C., the government is looking at phasing out a tax credit which would make it harder for them to pawn off your kids to adoptive parents. In Guatemala, the government is starting to authorize adoptions again 5 years after a child trafficking scandal froze that system, which sent as many as 4,000 kids a year to the United States. In Scotland, a shocking report finds that kids are being left at home with their parents even when they really are abused because the child protective industry can't afford to look after them. A couple from India has their child snatched in New Jersey after the kid suffers a head injury. The Indian government decides to get into that mess, and the kid's grandfather says that he's ready to go to the USA and take the kid if need be himself. In Canada this week, a former foster parent and board member for the Children's Aid Society in Dufferin pleads guilty to having sex with his foster daughter. In Manitoba, the inquiry into the death of a 5-year-old girl in foster care reveals a picture of what is being called a system in crisis, with unmanageable caseloads and poor supervision of Canadian CPS agents, leading to a lack of proper care for the kids in the system. In British Columbia, a child watchdog is troubled about new flaws in the computer system after an outpouring of complaints from social workers. And pole dancing lessons are now available for Canadian kids. In Australia, the Anglican Archbishop of Brisbane gives a personal apology to the victims of forced adoption. In England, a social worker is suspended after a cannabis factory was found in her house. Feminist opposition is growing against fathers' involvement in the children's lives after a divorce. And the government of Slovakia is getting ready to take the UK to the European Court over the British child protective industry's illegal child snatching practices. In entertainment news this week, Jessica Simpson is being criticized by the child welfare officials over pictures of her 4-month-old baby in a bikini which they deemed as inappropriate. Usher talks to Oprah about his nasty child custody battle with Tamika Foster. And in sports, boxing legend Hector Macho Camacho has his child abuse trial rescheduled for later in the year. In Las Vegas, Nevada, a foster parent who was accused accused of sexually abusing kids in his care gets his first court hearing. In Oklahoma, a man living in a foster home is arrested for lewd acts with a child. In Washington, a Seattle minister and former foster parent pleads guilty to child rape. And in Texas, a foster parent is arrested after causing serious injuries to a 2-year-old foster child, including burns on her chest, 2 broken ribs, and a serious head and brain injuries. In Oregon, parents go on the run to keep their kids out of the hands of CPS agents, but police catch up with them and snatch them anyway. In South Carolina, 2 real parents are caught after trying to rescue their kid from a foster home. In Texas, a boy who was kidnapped 8 years ago and was found last year is finally able to visit with his real parents in joint therapy sessions, but for now will remain in foster care, hopefully to be uprooted again at some point in the next couple of years and go home. And in Arizona, 2 young sisters are recaptured after running away from their foster home. The estranged wife of the California state treasurer wins visitation with her kids as she fights a crystal meth possession charge. A South Carolina couple who tried to adopt a Native American girl who was given back to her real father in Oklahoma is now trying to take the case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In Pennsylvania, a family gets $700,000 settlement after their HIV-positive child is denied admission to a private school. And in Michigan, 8 families are getting together to sue the child protective industry, alleging the CPS agents hid information about the disabilities and special needs of the kids who they adopted. In Pennsylvania, a man is sentenced to death for killing 2 men who sexually abused him when he was a child. And finally, tonight in Oklahoma, a father is still getting sucked dry for child support for his son who died while in a foster home nearly 9 months ago. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.